try to do something physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual every day. Adds value to my life. Is your business doing the profit margins you want? Think that there's power in that word no, but also power in the clarity of having a vision for yourself.
Got a good buddy of mine, Nick Darras with High Country Glass on the podcast today. What's up, man?
I appreciate you having me, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Thanks for making time to come out here. Why don't you tell everybody kind of who you are, what you do, tell them about your business, and give us a kind of a summary, give us a rundown.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I'm here today because of your gracious invite, and we do business together now, which I love doing business with you and like-minded people. But I started High Country Glass about 3 years ago.
Okay.
I started it as a raw blue-collar man that really knew very little about a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I was your typical upset with how a normal company treats people, how a normal company views people, and we're not all just numbers. So when I started my company, I really made sure that I focused on kind of changing the narrative on that, making sure everyone felt valued, making sure everyone had a place, and really just doing the right thing in the community, focusing more on treating people right, impacting our relationships, and chasing that relationship over chasing the dollar.
Right.
And here we are 3 years later, and we're thriving.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. How many kids you got?
I got one right now.
One? How old's that little guy?
4 going on 16.
4 going on 16?
Yeah.
I see that on Facebook. He's chasing you around on the 4-wheeler all the time.
Man, he's rolled that thing twice already.
Has he really?
He goes, Daddy, I'm strong. I eat my vegetables, and I'm a country boy. I'm going to get back on. And I'm like, man.
Did he turn it over himself and like beat his chest?
I was riding one day, and I just convinced my wife, no, it's a great idea, right? We'll get him a 4-wheeler. He'll be fine. Give him the chest protector.
You just sold her.
Yeah. And then she saw the bill of what it costed to be safe. And she was like, I really don't like this, but he's fine. So I was riding around and I go, where's my son? And I look and I'm like, this is not good. I just told my wife he's going to be fine. And I ride around the house and he's upside down. Yeah. He's on the 4-wheeler and he's like, Daddy, help. And I was like, oh no. Like, what's crooked? What's sideways on his bones, you know?
Right. You're like, I'm in trouble.
And he goes, I'm a country boy. I slid and I fell, but I'm strong. And I was like, let's push it back over and get back on. He goes,
4 years old.
And I look up, my wife's just like, oh my God. I said, no, that's the same look you gave me when I started the company.
Exactly. You know, you know those looks.
So I know it's going to work, you know?
That's so funny. I always tell my wife, we'll be having a conversation and I'll start to say, hey, you're right. And I've started saying, you're almost always right. Yeah. Right? She's almost always right. Like your wife was right that, you know what, he probably is going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't keep them from that their whole lives.
And as men, I'm sure as well as you know, we think we're always right until our wives remind us we're not.
Right. Until our wives remind us we're not.
And one thing I really struggled with when I first started was, when you're working somewhere else and you think, oh, I'm great. I can do this. I'm good at my job. I deserve the raise. I deserve the promotion. I want the recognition, right? You have this integrity as an employee that you're a part of the success of the company you're with. So what I really struggle with is almost like that imposter syndrome before it even became a thing. Because then I try to convince the wife that I'm right, that I need to start this company, right?
Right.
But then she says yes. And you're like, oh, she's supportive. And you're like, oh boy!
I
really hope I was right.
It's like when you sell somebody on something and they say yes, and you're like, oh wow, now I actually got to do the thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then it gets fun.
Yeah. Then it does get fun. No, it is always interesting. When you start out in entrepreneurship, especially being married, it's one of the things I love to talk about is, how do you be an entrepreneur? How do you be a successful entrepreneur? How do you stay in business? How do you be a dad? How do you be a husband? How do you run business? All that kind of stuff, because there's a bajillion things to do, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to get busy. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get lost in our work because being married's hard. Being a dad's hard.
Everything's hard.
It's not necessarily super, super simple or clear cut and dry. Right. I laugh because I know God has a sense of humor because he put 2 sinners of the opposite sex in the same household and said, go do life together.
That's right.
Right? It's like
with no instructions.
He gave us the Bible though. He gave us some instruction.
That's true.
Some instruction. But yeah, it's like, how are we going to navigate this thing with people of 2 very different personalities? And it's always funny because, every man has a certain opinion a lot of times about something in their marriage. And then the wife has a very different opinion about something else. Yeah. And it's funny, after a while, she'll be like, all right, go do it. And then you come back and she'll be like, I told you so.
Isn't it great though? Man. Isn't it great when you have 2 opposites? Yeah. And then they attract?
Absolutely.
I think there's like a science equation with that, right?
Right.
But one thing I've always learned is whether it's with business, being a father, being a husband, you have to be willing to adapt. You have to be willing to learn. I think you have to be willing to uphold, praise, and lift up whoever, wherever you're at, and just know you're not the center of it. Right. You never are. God is first. Yeah. But then it's making people feel good about themselves. And whether you have that mentality in business, your home life, with your kids, with your daughter, with my son. Yeah. Making them feel good and making them feel valued and appreciated and heard is a recipe for success anywhere you look.
Yeah, for sure. And you pair that with having grace, right? A lot of times people want to beat each other over the head. I was coaching somebody yesterday, and they were talking about some issues they're having, in their marriage. And it's like, well, God gives us grace, right? Obviously, because we're still sitting here despite our craziness, chaos, sinner stuff, right? But when we have a relationship with somebody else, especially our spouse or our kids, and we show them grace, like a lot of times the way we grow up, we're supposed to beat people over the head. That's what a leader looks like, right?
Yeah.
But that's really not leadership. Leadership is about love and grace,
right?
Just like God loves us. And so when you have grace with your wife or with your kids, it goes a lot further than yelling at them, or trying to beat them over the head for being wrong or whatever that may look like. Yeah, relationships are tough to navigate, no doubt.
You shouldn't have to yell. If you're yelling, you're doing something wrong.
So that's a rule that we set in our household when we got married 16 years ago. Like, we won't yell at each other. Like something's got to be bad wrong if we're yelling at each other.
Disagreements are needed.
Disagreements are part of the journey.
And I love my son seeing us come back together.
For sure.
You have like this disagreements of like this or that, or I don't feel heard or appreciated, or I asked you to do this. Those typical married household things.
Yeah.
But I think what's impactful is my son.
Should you buy a four-wheeler or not? It's going to be some conversation.
That was a little spontaneous. That was a little
Maybe there wasn't
It was
any
a deal
agreement on
I just
that.
couldn't pass
Right,
up. You know what I mean? But my wife is amazing, and she knows where my heart's at. And that kind of brings it back to all that is she knew where my heart was at.
Yeah.
She knew that it was the joy that I got watching him have that joy.
Right.
And us being able to give him something to do outside, not in front of a screen, not in front of a TV. So once she kind of got over that first initial shock, it was, oh, well, I know my husband's intention. And
Sure.
I think that's a big thing too, is knowing your intention. Like me and my wife will have an argument, right? And just like yours. But we never have an argument to make the other person feel bad.
Right.
It's always to overcome what
Something.
we're arguing, right?
Right.
And it's never lingering.
You're going to definitely have your differences. There's no doubt about that. But like you were talking about, your son is seeing how you love your wife, right? You're teaching him how to be a husband and a father. At some point, heard TJ Norris one time, he said, our sons will become us and our daughters will marry us. I got a girl.
That's a great saying.
Right?
Yeah.
So I got to watch myself.
That's a whole different ball game.
Different ball game. Like, my daughter's going to marry a man someday, and I got to make sure that I'm a reflection of what that expectation should be, because I'm setting that for her, for the last 10 years of her life and the future of her life until that day comes. Like, I want her to know this is what a healthy marriage should look like.
Yeah.
And so I think about that. We were talking originally about, like, we don't yell in our household. Like, that should be a rule. Yelling really isn't. I mean, you shouldn't be yelling at each other unless you're high-fiving each other at a football game or something, right?
Yelling is a sign of being unstable.
Yeah.
In the moment, for sure.
No, that's for sure. There's good wisdom in that.
Yeah.
But, your son is watching you guys grow together. And then one day he's going to have a wife, right? And so it's always interesting talking to other dads and the way that they treat their wives and things like that. I'm like, your kids are watching.
Yeah.
Right?
Everything.
I'm like,
everything.
You got a little girl. She going to grow up. Would you want some boy treating your girl like that? They're like, I'm like, yeah, you need to chew on that.
And they hear everything too. They hear how you talk to each other.
Everything.
I said to my son, yelled at me one day, was yelling at me, and then yelled at my wife. And I looked at him, I said, hey, you do not talk to my wife that way. That is my wife. Your mama, my wife, you do not speak to her that way. You say you're sorry right now. And it's stern.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm sorry, mama. A couple days went by. We're at the playground. Some little kid, this ball rolled over to my wife's feet. And he goes, hey, that's my mom. And I'm like, he used what I just said a couple days ago. And then I go, no, that's my mom. And he goes, no, it's my. And we just did like this little funny back and forth. But he knew his first instinct was like to that little boy.
Sure.
That's my mom, because I just said that's my wife. And those little impactful moments, you're establishing those core values at a young age for his family life.
What's interesting, though, is you get to see that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're present enough and aware enough to be able to see that in him and the way that he was able to pick that up from you. And it is true. Our kids, they pick up all kinds of stuff from us. And you've got to be, as they get a little older, it's kind of more interesting, the things that they do pick up. And you'll hear them say, you're like, where'd you hear that? You know? It's super funny. Being a parent is definitely, it's a blessing, but also a challenge. I remember kind of in the first few years of being a parent, you take two people who are doing life and you throw something else totally other in the mix, another little human with a personality and needs and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden your household becomes something totally different.
Just learning to live with each other. I mean, when we got married at a young age, me and my wife got married we got at 23. She was 22, I was 23. But people go, that was young. How did you know? I just knew.
Yeah.
I just knew. She changed me. She made me a better person. She made me a better man. I saw myself having a family with her, the white picket fence life.
Yeah.
and there was nobody else I wanted to waste my time with. It's just like you have that feeling. And then when you end up going through life and you realize, wow, we have really different viewpoints. We have really different ways. One of the biggest things we learned in growth is like our past, our trauma, our how we grew up, how our parents treated us. That really molds you into who you are today. So being cautious, like learning that aspect of like how your parents used to treat you, how you used to react as a younger child, and learning what those triggers were and why they were triggers. If you don't apply that as a parent, I mean, you're losing out on some serious keynotes right there on how to raise your children, because we use that to apply with our son all the time. Like, hey, I'm super proud of you. Great job. That recognition that like we never got, to make sure that no matter what we do, no matter at the end of the day how we feel, because you always have like that parent guilt, right? At the end of the day, oh man, I feel crappy about, being upset over spilling Cheerios in the truck or whatever, something stupid.
Yeah, because you can get mad
you
about
can, and they
stuff.
see it and they know. But then at the end of the day, I say to my wife, you know what? They'll never be able to say that we weren't there.
Right.
And that right there is like the key focal point, is we were always there.
I'll tell you a couple of interesting things you touched on. One was the Cheerios, right? Like, I'm halfway OCD. I like to really take care of things. And so that was a huge shift for me. Like, I want the grass cut. I want the truck washed. I want it clean. I want stuff put up in a place. Well, kids aren't necessarily hardwired that way. And I think it's important to instill discipline in them and educate them on why it's important to be a good steward and take care of things. Yeah. But on the flip side, like, I'll go out my driveway and there'll be straw wrappers. And I'm like, my immediate reaction is like, I'm throwing everything away, right? No more straws, no straw wrappers, no cups, we're out. And then I started thinking to myself, I'm like, there's going to be a day where there won't be any more straw wrappers. Yeah. Right? There will be a day when I walk out in the driveway and I think to myself, I really wish there were some straw wrappers in the driveway. Yeah. Just because they're going to be gone. They're going to grow out of our lives. But also another thing you said too, talking about being married for a long time. We got married the day after we graduated college. I think it was 22, something like that. It's real similar. We've been married for 16 years. Wow. And a lot of people, they're like, man, that seems like a long time for somebody. But same kind of thing. I made a choice, right? And that's what marriage is. If you're going to be married for a long time, you're just going to have to look at each other and say, it's not about being perfect and all the roses and cupcakes and rainbows all the time. Quite the opposite. Especially when you throw a kid in the mix. It's hey, you know what? We're going to be committed to surviving this thing together, whatever that looks like. It's like a business partnership. You literally sit down and you're like, hey, we're going to go build this life together, and we're going to be in it, and we're going to hold hands. We might not agree. We might be frustrated. We might have bad days. Yeah. We may need a day apart. That's okay. But at the end of the day, we're going to be committed to doing this thing together. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, they just quit too easy.
You just gotta, it's acts of service towards each other too. You always have to look to serve your other partner. Sure. If you know that your partner likes tea or coffee in the morning, you better, when you wake up to get your own coffee, you better get some for your wife. You know what she's going for to get. It's those little things that you're always looking to serve and acts of kindness on your significant other.
So I always tell people, if you're not careful, like if you have a certain way you want to be loved, right? Whether that's tea or coffee or back rub or flowers or acts of service, there's 5 different love languages. Mm-hmm. Can't remember who wrote that book. Might have been, I can't remember the guy's name.
We're huge on that.
Gary Chapman. Great book. And people should read that even if you aren't in a relationship, because understanding love languages and then having a conversation about it and knowing what your spouse's love language is really important to being able to navigate that stuff. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we ask each other all the time, and we ask our daughter as well, is, hey, how's your love tank? Right? How's your love tank? Because we don't want it to be empty. Because a lot of times we get weird. I get weird. We all probably get weird when our love tank gets empty. Yeah. Like if our thing is quality time, right? Hanging out, let's curl up on the couch, watch a movie, read a book together, whatever that may look like. Scroll TikTok for all I care. Yeah. Quality time. Right?
Just being together.
Just being together. Or whether it's gifts. Hey, here's the coffee, here's the tea, here's the water, here's the small thing. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, your love tank is either full or empty. And when, like, I can notice it in my daughter, like, she'll get, like, withdrawn.
Yeah,
like,
self-secluded,
yeah. And I'm like, what's wrong? She'll be like, she'll say, my love tank's empty. That's awesome. We started that at a young age. And even this morning, I asked her, I was headed out the door, I was like, hey, how's your love tank? She's like, it's good, Dad. I'm like, all right, just checking in. Yeah. But just kind of getting simple about, like, how to navigate life and ask each other questions like that. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people, they won't even ask their spouse something like that. Hey, babe, how's your love tank? They wouldn't ask because they don't want to know the answer. Empty. Right. Well, okay. Excuse me. That means you got to do something about it.
At that point, why are you married?
Right? You got to go through, you got to be committed to getting through the journey.
You're right.
Right.
Exactly.
And loving your spouse how they want to be loved.
And learning the little niches about it.
For sure.
Like you could, like the acts of service. Yeah. That could mean a million different things. Right. And like for my wife, it was always like cleaning, wanted me to do the dishes, wanted me to do the laundry. So I would like sought out to do that. but then she would already have taken care of it. So I kind of got to a point where I said, hey, I'm trying to love you, but you're beating me to the punchline every single time. And it was a conversation we need to have. And then obviously now it's on me to act and do it, not just like, oh, I'll just do it later, which was an issue at first. I'll own that. You know, I'll be like, oh, I got ADHD, so I'm always like, oh, just later. And then the pressure hits, right? You're like, oh, I'll do it right now.
Yeah.
So she just ended up doing it, which was what we were running into. But she just let me know, hey, I don't feel loved right now. And I'm like, oh, snap out of it, you know?
I'll tell you something funny. My wife doesn't like to take out the trash for whatever reason. Okay. And the trash can would overflow. I mean, into the floor. And I'm like, what is happening here? Okay. You know? And so what I found out eventually is when that trash can starts filling up, Justin Rogers better take that trash out. Like, that is my job, you know? And even it's funny, like last night we're getting done, we're cleaning up the kitchen. I noticed the trash can's getting full. It's kind of cold outside. I'm like, I gotta go take the trash out. But, and that's okay, kind of like what you're talking about. You just got to navigate that in your relationship, though. But that's how you stay married for a long time.
You know, I saw you guys interacting the other day when I was there measuring for your windows. Yeah. And I thought it was the coolest thing because she was walking around. I think you guys just got back from using the internet, right?
Yeah,
Chick-fil-A.
Right, yeah.
I was like, oh, Chick-fil-A. Like, nah, not right now. And she's walking around like, let's do this. And you're like, you're right, but I want to handle this first. She's like, you're right. And it was just like, you're right, but. And it was so cool because that's how me and my wife are.
Yeah.
It's like we want all these things, but we also understand what our goals are.
Sure.
You know?
And they all, you know, money only goes so far.
Right.
So like you want to turn it into the Taj Mahal, sort of, but at the same time, like we got to focus in on, okay, we need to get these things done first. We need to pay attention to this and then we could do that later. But I tell you, it's just maturity in your relationship. And I also tell you this, when you talk about, you know, your love languages and your love tank and your kids paying attention, all that kind of stuff, that's so fulfilling to go back to work.
It is.
Right. Like that's kind of a big why. And you know, my marriage hasn't always been that way. We've had to work on things a lot. Yeah. There's been a lot of tough days. But when you get to go home to like your best friend or your partner and you feel like you are in alignment with each other at the end of the day, that is empowering. Like that will keep a man going to the end of the earth, right?
It makes your mind quiet of all the external noise going on.
It does.
When you come
can
home.
go do things. You can go be the hunter and the gatherer and the killer and do the things in life that God made you to do while she's at home doing her things. And when you come together at the end of the day, it just feels really fulfilling.
I think just admiring like each other's role too. To touch on what you just said, that's a great point because that fulfilling is a two-way street too.
Sure.
And so with me, I always make sure that my wife knows being a stay-at-home mom, because she hasn't worked since our son was born. It was right before COVID hit. You know, a lot of people just dismiss how hard it is.
Sure.
And they hear, oh, what does your wife do? Is she a part of the business? No, I intentionally do that on purpose because I don't want to have that at my house as well.
Right.
And they go, oh, what does she do? Oh, she's a stay-at-home mom. But trust me, that's like 2 full-time jobs.
She's with that 4-year-old boy who's turning his 4-wheeler over in the yard yelling, I'm a country boy, all day long.
To a 31-year-old boy coming home doing the same she's got
thing.
2 kids. Yeah, different ages, you know?
Yeah. Turning his 4-wheeler over in the yard going, I'm a country boy. Yeah. He learned that from somewhere.
He did. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
No, that's good, man. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
But it is true. Being a stay-at-home mom is a really respectful thing, a respectable thing. And it's not necessarily easy. You got to think, because my wife's been stay-at-home mom for the most part. I mean, she helps with real estate and stuff, but mostly, you know, she's doing homeschooling and staying at home. And that's a lot. I took it for granted at first because I didn't really realize how much it is. But there was somebody, like especially in the beginning, they can't even talk to.
No, it's hard.
So they're at home alone basically all day dealing with somebody screaming at them. Yeah. You know, very demanding.
It's like owning a business.
Yeah. It's like
you get screamed at. Yeah. So if only one side that's getting recognized, then that's not fair.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely no fun. And it's also really mature, you know, for you to realize that in your relationship with your wife, to be able to recognize that so that when you go home, you know, you guys can work on, you know, the love languages of filling those things. But another thing somebody told me one time, if you don't love your spouse how they want to be loved, somebody else will. Yeah. And that's dangerous.
That is dangerous.
You know, a spouse running around with an empty love tank, that's dangerous. A lot of people are like, oh man, they get mad at their spouse for being out there doing things they shouldn't be, running around on them. But it's like, y'all hadn't had any mature conversations about filling each other's love tanks. You don't even know what each other's love languages are.
Right.
Like you're not taking extreme ownership of your relationship or each other, nor being a good steward of it.
I think that comes down to coaching and willing to learn, right?
Sure.
I mean, with business, I didn't go to business school. I didn't do anything. I was a blue collar guy that got fed up with how people were being treated and wanted to do something about it. And my wife was the biggest support cast with that. But same goes with your marriage. Like we did premarital counseling. not because we had issues, but because we wanted to understand each other. We were going into a commitment that we both understood the severity of.
Sure.
And then while we're in it, we're like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. We're experiencing things that we have never even thought about coming across. We need some guidance. And we sign up for marital counseling. And it wasn't because, again, we had issues. It was because we wanted to get the tools.
It's preemptive.
Counseling is getting the necessary tools to go through the battle. You don't not go to the armory before you go out into war, right? You got to get what you need.
You don't expect to win on the game day without practice.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what you learn.
Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We want to give a shout out to our sponsor, The Acquisition CEO. If you're curious about buying or selling a business, hit him up at the link below, theacquisitionceo.com. Also, give him a follow on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And now back to the podcast. Thanks.
No, that's a great point about counseling and coaching and mentoring, because a lot of people, they're trying to fight battles without the proper equipment, whether that's in their business or in their personal life or in their relationship with their spouse, and they've never prepared, right? That's why I always talk about being a good steward of yourself, and I was talking to some business owners this morning about it. Be a good steward of yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. Because if you don't do that on a daily basis, when things hit the fan, when it's game day, you're not prepared to play. And I've heard it said a lot by a lot of coaches. They say nobody wins on game day. They win in practice.
Right.
But how many people do you know in life, and when it comes down to game day in your marriage, they ain't been practicing.
Right.
When it comes down to game day in your business, they ain't been practicing. When it comes down to game day being a dad, they ain't been practicing. Right. When it comes down to game day being physical, doing something, moving a case of water, right? Going on vacation, being active with your kids, riding four-wheelers with your kids. How many people do you know they come down to game day and they have spent no time practicing and they wonder why they get hurt?
Right. I mean, one of the greatest compliments I've ever had, touching on that, is employees and people that I do work for, they've started to say, I don't even bother to call you after 4:30 anymore. I said, why? And they said, because we probably figure you're out riding with your son or something. And then same thing with my wife. You know, we'll be in the office talking with my guys or on a job site or whatever. They'll all start, we'll be on a job site somewhere, and this happened a couple of times. They'll all start talking about, how men get. And I've had said to me a couple of times, Nick's not going to join the conversation. He doesn't say anything about his wife.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's right.
Good to be known for.
That is a good thing.
But I'm over here getting made fun of about that, and people don't understand, like, that's a good thing to be made fun of.
It is a good thing.
I'm not going to participate in this, and I've made that clear.
Yeah.
And that is the difference between what they go home to and what we go home to.
100%. You should never be out publicly like beating on your spouse. Right. You shouldn't even participate that. And I agree, a lot of people, especially in the business place, they do that. And I'm like, well, sounds like you should go home and fix it. But nobody wants accountability. Nobody wants that. I'm like, okay, what are you going to do about it? Oh, it sounds like work. Yeah, it does. It is. Go do something about it. You won't have to come here and complain.
I said to my wife, it was last year, I went to a business event up in Charlotte, and she texted me. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just at the hotel hanging out, just getting some work done. And she's like, what are you going to do later? I said, there are some really cool electric scooters and an ice cream shop right down the road. Yeah. And she's like, oh boy, I know what you're about to do. And it's like, she knew, like, I'm in the city by myself. I'm out there trying to grow my knowledge for my business with my business coaching that I'm experiencing at the time. And then I'm also all alone. And I'm choosing to do these things that, like, A, I wish my wife was with me.
Yeah.
B, she knows my intentions. And C, it's like, she understands that I need that time, alone to regroup and refresh and be able to receive the next day what I'm going to receive, even though she's home with our son. She could be mad at me. I told her this summer, I took the guys out on a boating trip, and I came home and I said, thank you for allowing me to do that. She's like, I didn't allow you to do that. I said, yes, you did. You could have made me feel really bad.
Yeah.
And you didn't.
Yeah.
Because you understood. And she's like, well, no, you're congratulating the guys for all the hard work they did. And I said, yeah, but you could have also been really resentful.
Sure.
And you weren't.
Yeah. No, but that's maturity in your marriage. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't pay that any attention. They don't tend to the garden of the marriage in their life. But again, when it comes down to game day, they hadn't practiced. Most people don't have complicated conversations with their spouse. And they don't talk about their finances. They don't talk about their love tank. They don't talk about their kids. They don't talk about leadership in their home. They don't have rules like, hey, we're not going to yell at each other. They don't have any of that stuff.
Right.
And for me, like, we get to do this thing one time, right? We're going to die. I don't know if anybody knows that, but that's the final destination.
That and taxes are guaranteed.
Sometime. No, I'm just kidding. We're headed to the end. And so we might as well build a life of intention and legacy or making a difference of some capacity. And so just like you said, like, I want my daughter when she goes and finds a boyfriend or she has a household, be like, hey, you know what? My parents did it this way and this way. We need to do it. I don't want her to be motivated to do the opposite. Like, oh man, I grew up in a terrible home and we don't need to do it that way and be so confused or lost. I want her to be coming to us as a resource and for direction and as an example. But also, like, when I get old, I want to still be in love with my wife.
Yeah.
My grandfather, they were married for, I don't know, like 70 years and they still flirted with each other.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
until
Isn't
she
it cool
passed.
to see?
It was, yeah.
It's so
I would
rare.
laugh,
Yeah.
you know. But he was. I'll tell you another cool thing about it. Man was so full of joy and peace. Still is. He's still here. She's not. But, like, to see them love each other for their whole lives was so cool to me. Like, that's what I want. I want to be old, sitting there in a retirement home, like slapping her on the butt. You know.
Yeah.
You know?
So let me ask you this question now.
Yeah.
What's your one grounding piece that you tell yourself on your toughest day?
Be a good steward, right? So that's what I always go back to. I go back to a biblical concept of God made us to do this thing and live this life, and I want to be a good steward of it. And so if I give up or quit, or if I tap out, you know, when things get hard, I'm not being a good steward of it. Or if I can't handle it, and I was thinking about this yesterday, like if I'm like, man, I need to escape, right? I'm done. I need to go get hammered, right? We need to go escape life.
Yeah.
Then I'm not capable. And so what do I need to do to level up so that I can become capable? Because me personally, you know, I want to build multiple businesses. I want to be able to make a huge impact. I want to be able to give away millions of dollars. I want to be able to make a difference on this planet. But I got to be capable of being able to do that. I got to be capable of navigating that. I got to be capable of delegating and being clear and having teams in place and people and processes. And so that's what I always think about when I need to get grounded. Or it's not really about getting inspired or motivated or getting fired up.
Yeah, getting you through your toughest day though.
It's really about, hey, you know, God made me to do this thing, and here I am having an opportunity to do it. I got to be a good steward of it. Right. Because how many of us pray for a moment? We're like, man, God, if you could just give me the business. And he's like, all right, cool. He opens the floodgates and you get all the business. And you're like, oh, I'm going crazy. You know, and then you don't spend any time with your family. And then you might become addicted to stuff. And then you wind up, you know, 3 years later throwing it all away.
Yeah.
Right. We pray for it.
Happens all the time to people.
So we've got to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's what I think about. And there are moments when I'm like, hey, you got to level up. You know, your phone's on fire. You got everybody needs all kinds of stuff. Are you the man for the job?
Yeah. And it's okay to have like those little meltdown moments
Sure,
internally,
yeah.
you know. I'll
Okay.
be sitting at Starbucks and my phone doesn't stop ringing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like just please stop. But then eventually you get snap out of it, you know. And I've noticed a lot of entrepreneurs, and that's why I want to ask that question, have these little like catchphrases, right?
Sure.
That kind of snap you back to reality.
I say to myself, you're the man for the job.
That's good.
You're the man for the job.
That's good.
You know, if my phone's on fire, I got 30 text messages and 15 missed phone calls and 100 emails. You're the man for the job.
Doesn't it feel
Go
good
navigate
when
it.
people just call you over recommendations and all these things?
Yeah.
And you're feeling, and usually God does it at a perfect time. Like you're feeling down about yourself. You feel like a failure. You feel like you lost today or whatever. And then just that little phone call of like, hey, so-and-so said you do a great work. And
You're like, yes.
you're like, okay, I'm doing something right.
Doing something right.
Yeah. I mean, my little moment is, you know, when you're talking about situations like experience, we'll touch on. I just sit there and I think, they didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for my pity party. They didn't ask for me to just sulk in the sorrows. Now there can be a moment where like you're trying to get yourself out of a hole, right?
Sure.
Where that's constant. You get yourself out of the hole, you get yourself on top of the mountain, and I feel like
You can whine and complain for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and then you roll right back
on.
down into the hole, and it's just constant, right? So getting caught up in that can be tough. But A, they didn't ask for this. And then B, I looked at my son one day when I first started my business. I said, Carson, I'm doing this for you and my family. I will not fail. Daddy will not fail you.
Yeah.
And so I just remember looking down at him while he was sleeping, and I just promised that to him. And I'm like, I don't break promises.
Yeah.
I can't break this promise.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I do that sometimes. You know, you talk about like looking at your kids while they sleep.
Oh.
Like you peek in there and you're like, I got to go be the best version of myself. I think about it all the time. Like mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. Like it's so critical to make time for those things, but most people don't. But your kids need a hero in their lives, and it really should be you as parents.
But when you do have to give it a little bit more, I think it's important that you let them know.
Sure,
Like
yeah.
the other day
You can be like, hey, I'm having a hard day.
Yeah,
You
or
know?
I was working till 9:00 at the bank the other night,
Yeah.
trying to get it done. And I said, hey, Daddy's got to work a little bit extra tonight.
Sure.
And I made sure I stopped off at the house on my way and said hello and good night. But guess what? I went through the whole day, saw my kid for maybe 5 minutes, didn't get to put him down for bed. Got home, he was already sleeping. But when I got home, he was so excited. Daddy was when he like woke up out of his bed. He's like, Daddy? I was like, hey, buddy. Gave him a hug. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I got the job done. Everyone's safe. Everyone's happy. I'm home with my wife. She's waiting for me in bed to finally get done with my day. And my son is happy to see me. And it's like, that's when you know you're rich in life.
Well, that is true wealth. But also it's about seasons and communication. So there are seasons in your business life that are going to require a significant amount of effort compared to other seasons in business life, right? And so what I have found is you've got to be in alignment with your spouse. You've got to look at your spouse and be like, hey, the market's crazy. We're going to go through a growing season. I'm going to get real committed to these things. I'm not going to forget you guys along the way. We're going to stay in this thing, but it's going to be a fight for, 6 months or maybe a year, whatever that looks like. And it's going to require a lot of effort. Yeah. But on the back side of this, we're going to scale up to here, right? So it's really about communicating and articulating that to your spouse or the people in your family or even your kids. Because as an entrepreneur, it's not 9 to 5. It's not 6 hours a day. It's not 7 hours a day, until you get to the way other side of the adventure. But when you're in the growing phase of any business, like you just said, you're going to be out there some days till 9 o'clock at night. My daughter asked me the other day something about, I don't remember what it was, but I'm in a growing season in my own personal life. And I knew that, with the moving and that kind of stuff and a lot of real estate things going on. And we've got 5 businesses that are in the works of growth and management and sales and team building and all that kind of stuff. And so I knew that personally I was going to be going into a growing season of my life this year. Yeah. And so I told them like, hey, I'm going into a growing season, but I tell you what has really helped me is being around other people who have multiple businesses and are growing multiple things, because they're not crazy either. They're like, hey, you just navigate, you just create structure, you implement systems. It's not complicated. And I'm like, oh, okay. So there's power in who you surround yourself with,
It's always like I always relate to like being thrown in cold water. You jump in that pool, you're initial like, that shock, right? You're like, oh my God, I can't breathe. And then you're like, all right, I'm getting used to it.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of relates to.
So I'll tell you a funny story. I used to have a cold plunge and it had a big old square in the top of it. And I would get in it for the same reason, because to do something hard, but I tell you what it taught me is just cold water. And so a lot of times when I have to do something real hard these days, it could be a business conversation. It could be it usually is revolved around articulating some sort of business negotiation thing. I just tell myself, I remember standing on top of that tank thinking, it's just cold water. Get in the freaking tank. Right? It's just a conversation. Go do the thing. But articulate it in a way, like set down your own personal agenda. Articulate it in a way for the people you represent the most, right? Yeah. It could be your family, could be your staff, could be a team of people, could be a client. Because a lot of people, they let their emotions get hung up in the way that they lead their life or their business, and it costs their clients the most.
Yeah, which can also be the reason behind a lot of success. But I think, I'm very emotional and I fall receptive to that. Really caring about every project that I do and really like emotionally like, oh, don't you love it? Like we're creating this cool thing. But I think on the flip side of that, don't overpromise.
Yeah.
And you can get emotional about the right things that will equal to the success of the project, but sometimes you can't control everything.
Right.
And so, being happy about the outcome, and maybe if it's not the outcome that you weren't expecting to have, emotionally you have to keep yourself composed, because at the end of the day, as long as you weren't lying to the customer, as long as you weren't misleading them intentionally or doing anything manipulative, their reaction is just a reaction of the moment. It's not anything personal. It's not anything towards you or your business. They don't think that like High Country Glass did this on purpose.
Right. You're not getting them.
Yeah. I'm not like intentionally not showing up at their shower door on the 4th day instead of the 5th. It's just little things like that. You can get upset because you care.
Yeah.
But then like, don't let it affect you and spew over into the other things in life that really drive your mission on what you're doing every day.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of good truth in that. Things never go. A lot of times things don't go as planned. No. Right? You can have a great plan, especially in construction, scheduling and all that kind of stuff. Like on that big window project up in the cliffs, got it all put together. Everything looks great. Hurricane comes, bad for all the stuff involved with that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go as planned. Whose fault is that? It's not really anybody's intentional fault. Nobody really planned to have a hurricane and cause that. It's just the timelines didn't shake out.
Everything got pushed to their limits.
Everything just got pushed to the limits. But another thing too is I realize when I have to have hard conversations, I'm just in the information business. And so I start telling people that, like, I know this may involve some of your emotions, and I certainly understand and respect that, but I'm really just in the information business. And so I'm just here to deliver the facts, right? Here's where we're at. Here's what the timeline looks like. Here's what the money looks like. Here's how things shook out. Yes, we had this game plan, but at the end of the day, we're all headed in the same direction. So the most important thing that we could do is focus on continuing to move things down the field to where we're headed towards the same direction. And we still want to solve this problem. And almost, 99% of the time people are like, Yeah, okay, that seems like a reasonable idea.
Yeah.
Because you just take them off edge,
Yeah, you kind of one thing I always ask before a window job, and I was going to ask you, but I figured you've been a part of a lot of window jobs, like you just said, is have you ever been a part of one? Because that's a scary thing for a lot of people, right?
Oh, it can be.
I mean, you're having complete strangers come into your house and just
open it up,
rip it open. Yeah, every window's coming out, and you have to pray to God that everything was right and accurate. And so it can be a little daunting. So I always tell people like, hey, this is what to expect. I almost like take them to coffee and kind of explain and walk them through the process. And one of the things I always say is, don't worry if any of this doesn't happen how we think. I already have things in place to correct it.
Right.
And they go, okay, cool. So when they walk in, they go, oh my goodness, there's dust on the couch. I have a cleaning crew. They're coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's like they just don't have to worry about it.
Let's talk about funny thing you mentioned, like dust on the couch and that kind of stuff. Subcontractors. I think that you can really tell a difference in really good subcontractors and subpar subcontractors by the way that they keep the job clean.
Yeah.
Right. And it sets the expectation. And I see it on a lot of things, whether it's people that I coach or things I do myself. I can always tell when someone really cares. They lay out tarps, they brought a shop vac, they got a dustpan. At the end of the day, they're cleaning up, they're organizing, they're stacking stuff up. The people who don't care, you come home or you come to a project and they're done for the day and it looks like a hurricane's hit and you're like, what in the world's going on?
Yeah.
So to the people that are listening, you can learn that from people that you have come to your house and do work. And then also if you're a subcontractor, you can set yourself apart just by simply keeping your project clean.
Yeah.
But
things will go south very quick with that, even if you have things in place. And I'm glad you brought that up because I have things in place with my company. I'm a small company, so I don't have a million SOPs. I have an employee handbook. I have some SOPs, but I haven't thought of everything. And, so to really.
Well, you can overthink it too, but that's a whole nother subject.
Exactly. So to me, it comes down to like morals, common sense, and I'm hiring the right people with morals, knowing that like what's right and wrong.
Right.
But long story short, we had some new individuals and they weren't quite sure I wasn't quite sure of their morals and they weren't quite sure of how we expect things fully yet. And ended up turning to a situation where a contractor we do about 200 showers for a year walked into their house that was just about to be closed on. It was a 90-day build with mud tracked all the way through the house. I mean, It was, I was like literally in my truck about to have one of those breakdowns.
Have a conniption.
I'm like hyperventilating. I'm in the QT getting gas. I'm like, oh, today's a great day. And the contractor's like, Nick, before I freak out, I need to talk to you. And I was like, they did what? And so I said, send me photos. Let me see what's going on. I called every single one of my guys like directly. And I said, listen, you need to clean up. I don't care about any more shower glass going in today in that house. You stop what you're doing, go down to the store with the company card, grab all the cleaning supplies possible. Nobody leaves until I get pictures of that floor completely spotless. If we need to go back tomorrow to finish the install, I get it.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I think 10 o'clock at night. It was bad. That's bad. It was bad. Let's just say they were there for about 6 hours cleaning.
That's crazy.
It was just a rainy, muddy day. But you know what? It all came from good intentions because they knew I wanted the job done. But it was raining and it was crappy weather. They knew the builder needed it done, but everyone ignored the house rules when they knew the intention. So just a simple conversation made me understand, okay, I now know why this happened. I now need to do something to where this never happens again. Right. So then just kind of coming together with the team and just saying, look, this is not acceptable.
So what'd you implement? Booties or?
Well, that's been a thing, booties, floor covering, it was just a mess. It was chaos in every direction you could think of with wanting
preparation.
Right. Yeah. And then just kind of letting them know what's more important. Maybe I wasn't quite clear on like, instead of just get it done, hurry up and get it done, make sure it looks good, make sure it works good.
That's what they heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Compared to do it the right way, spend, because they were worried that if they took all this time to set up the RAM board and all that they wouldn't get the job done.
Right.
So they were just trying to make me happy. And the process made me really not happy,
Not good.
But it realigns with kind of how our spouse conversation, coming back together, not yelling, talking, keeping that mutual respect, but like setting the guideline standard moving forward and knowing that this is not going to be repeated and making clear what is a priority. I'd rather have a clean workspace and get the job done than just get the job done and piss off everybody in the process.
So now they know if Nick calls says, let's get it done in a hurry, that also means don't forget the basic steps.
Yeah, I'm not scheduling a job on rainy days anymore,
Well, and that's the thing too, is you learn, you start to set some standards for yourself. You're like, okay, hey, look, we're just not doing that.
I wasn't clear enough.
It never works out. Like, I tell people I don't do emergency real estate because I'm usually doing something else and I'm not allowed to be present Like if you called me and said, hey, we need to go do this deal and there's 14 offers on the table. I'm like, we're already behind the 8 ball. Same kind of thing. It's like, hey, can you come do this in a hurry? That's usually not a good idea. You just can't put a plan in place for a win. And it usually costs people, emotional expense.
And a lot of financial expense.
Yeah, and financial expense.
I mean, I'm in the quick serve business, right? People have broken door glass. People have closers that cause the entrances to their family businesses to slam shut and hit customers in the leg. So it's like getting there quick and responding, Sometimes you make a lot of mistakes with that. You jump over, as I say, don't jump over dollars for pennies.
All right, so Nick, we'll wrap this thing up. I always ask people kind of at the end, if there's one piece of advice that you could give somebody, whether it's a contractor, husband, father, sales, whatever it is, what is one piece of advice that you would give people that you think might make a difference in their life?
Treat others the way you want to be treated in every situation. And that sounds so cliche, but I can't tell you how many contractors that are good, the good ones, that we deal with daily. I mean, we deal with everything from homeowners in Section 8 or apartments to multi-million-dollar houses in the cliffs. And I can tell you what, the best jobs ever ran are with the contractors that show so much respect to everyone involved.
Yeah.
And as a subcontractor, that makes me want to work 10 times harder because of the mutual respect. And I think if you start there, everything else is going to follow.
Yeah. No doubt.
And whether you're starting a business, whether you're with your family, whether you're with your son or your daughter, showing that mutual respect and just treating others the way you want to be treated will get you as far as you could possibly imagine in business.
I think it's great advice, bro.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on, man.
I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.